There's a version of you that doesn't think. That version woke up this morning, reached for a phone before opening its eyes, poured coffee with its left hand even though you're right-handed, and drove to work without consciously choosing a single turn. That version brushed its teeth for exactly as long as it always has, not a second more, not a second less. That version is running your life for somewhere between 40 and 66% of your waking hours. Research by behavioral scientist Wendy Wood and her colleagues, first published in 2002, placed habitual behavior at around 45% of daily actions. A more recent 2025 study, tracking 105 adults across 3,755 real-time behavioral moments, found that roughly 65% of behaviors were habitually triggered, and 88% were habitually executed, meaning performed with minimal conscious oversight. The range across studies is wide because measuring automaticity is genuinely hard. But every methodology points to the same core truth. Most of what you do, you don't decide. Not because you're lazy, not because you're unconscious, but because your brain, which represents only 2% of your body weight, yet consumes roughly 20% of your total energy, is ruthlessly efficient. Research from Cambridge neuroscientist Simon Laughlin and colleagues confirms this figure is well established across multiple measurement methods. The brain does not like waste, and conscious thought is expensive. So, your brain does something extraordinary. It takes the things you do repeatedly and shrinks them. It compresses them. It packs them into compact neural pathways that require almost no active attention to execute. This is the gift, and this is the trap. The gift is obvious. You don't have to consciously learn to drive every morning. You don't have to decide how to hold a fork. The brain handles the familiar, so the conscious mind can handle the new. That's elegant. That's survival-grade efficiency, honed over hundreds of thousands of years of evolution. The trap is quieter, because that same mechanism, that beautiful compression engine, doesn't distinguish between habits that help you and habits that hollow you out. It doesn't care whether you're automating a morning run or automating a second glass of wine. It doesn't care whether your reflexive response to stress is a deep breath or a sharp word to someone you love. Automation doesn't have a moral compass. It only has a groove. And the longer you walk in that groove, the deeper it gets. Picture a woman named Diane. Every evening, she walks through her front door at 6:47 p.m. She hangs her keys on the hook, always the hook, kicks off her shoes, and walks directly to the kitchen. Not because she's hungry, not because she planned to, but because the kitchen is where her stress goes. She opens the refrigerator, stares into it for a few seconds, closes it, then opens the cabinet. She's not looking for anything specific. She is performing a ritual her brain designed without her permission. Within 8 minutes of arriving home, she has eaten something she didn't want. She will not remember deciding to. Diane is not unusual. Diane is most of us. Here is the question worth sitting with. What are you doing right now that you didn't choose? Not in a philosophical sense, though that question has its place. In a very literal sense. What actions have you outsourced to automation so thoroughly that you would struggle to tell someone exactly when you started doing them? That question matters because habits don't announce themselves. They accumulate quietly, the way sediment settles at the bottom of a river. Over weeks, they become grooves. Over months, they become channels. Over years, they become the entire landscape of a life. This volume is not about discipline. Discipline is willpower applied to a resistant action. What we're exploring here goes deeper than that. We're talking about design. We're talking about understanding the internal machinery of repeated behavior and then deliberately, purposefully,
using that machinery to build something better than what you inherited from your own past. The researchers who study this domain call the core mechanism a habit loop. The language is clinical, the implications are not. Every habit you have, every single one, follows a three-part sequence. A cue, something that signals the brain to initiate a behavior; a routine, the behavior itself, which can be physical, mental, or emotional; and a reward, the payoff your brain receives that tells it this loop is worth keeping. The loop is not a theory, it is wiring. And like all wiring, it can be rerouted.
But before we talk about rerouting, we need to talk about reading, because most people try to change habits without ever understanding which loop they're actually in. That's like trying to fix a car engine by changing the color of the car. It looks like effort, it produces nothing. In the sections ahead, we will move through the mechanics of this system, not as an academic exercise, but as a practical map, a blueprint. By the time this volume closes, you will not just understand why your habits exist, you will understand how to dismantle the ones that cost you and how to construct, brick by deliberate brick, the ones that compound into the life you're actually after. We begin where every habit begins, with a signal so small you've probably been ignoring your entire life.
The cue is where the loop lives and dies. Research in behavioral science, including foundational work by Wendy Wood and David Neal, as well as the popular framework later synthesized by writer James Clear, has consistently identified 5 primary categories of cues: location, time, emotional state, other people, and the immediately preceding action. That's it. 5 categories. Every habit you have was born from at least one of them. Think about that for a moment. The triggers that govern a substantial portion of your daily behavior fall into 5 simple buckets. That isn't discouraging, it's clarifying. Because if you know which bucket your cue lives in, you can find it. And if you can find it, you can work with it. The brain loves cues because they reduce cognitive overhead. When the brain detects a familiar signal, it begins preparing the associated routine before you've consciously decided anything. Researchers call this quality automaticity, the degree to which a behavior runs without deliberate control. The journal Psychology and Health published findings in 2025 showing that 88% of everyday behaviors are performed habitually in this way, meaning smoothly with minimal conscious guidance. High automaticity behaviors are the deepest grooves. They are also the ones most worth examining.
Location is perhaps the underappreciated cue category. Your kitchen isn't just a kitchen. Your couch isn't just a couch. For your nervous system, they are loaded environments, packed with behavioral expectation. The moment you enter certain spaces, your brain begins queuing up what it expects to happen next. Wendy Wood's research demonstrates that this environmental cue effect is so powerful that simply changing your physical context is often enough to disrupt an established habit without any act of willpower at all. Consider Marcus. He set up a home office at the beginning of a new job, determined to be productive. He bought a proper desk, a good chair, proper lighting. For the first 2 weeks, it worked. Then, gradually, he started watching short videos, just while he waited for files to load, then longer ones. Then, without quite deciding, he began checking social media every 20 minutes. Within a month, his desk had become a site of distraction, not focus. He hadn't changed, his environment had trained him. The location had accumulated associations, and those associations became cues, and those cues became routine, and those routines became the shape of his afternoons. When Marcus finally identified location as the problem, the fix was not discipline. He rearranged his desk. He faced a different wall. He put his phone in a different room. He was not fighting himself. He was changing the signal.
Here is the question I want you to carry.
Which of your environments have trained you rather than you training them? Think of one space in your life, your bedroom, your car, a particular chair. What does your brain start doing the moment you enter that space? Is it what you chose or what accumulated? This week, pick one habit you want to understand. It can be something you want to change or something you want to reinforce. For 3 days, every time you perform that habit, write down just 4 things: where you are, what time it is, how you're feeling, and what you did immediately before. That's it. No judgment, no intervention yet, just observation. By day 3, a pattern will emerge that you cannot unsee.
The routine is the most visible part of the loop, which is precisely why people focus on it first and fail to change it. The routine is not the problem. It is the symptom, or more accurately, it is the solution your brain arrived at given the cue it received and the reward it was seeking. Change the routine without addressing the cue or the reward, and the brain will simply find another route to the same destination. This is why willpower-based habit change has such a mixed track record. The ego depletion model, the idea that willpower is a finite fuel tank that empties as you use it, was enormously influential for 2 decades. But large-scale replication attempts have produced conflicting results. A 23-laboratory study involving over 2,100 participants failed to find a significant depletion effect. A subsequent 36-lab study with more than 3,500 participants found similarly negligible results. The honest current science summary is this: whether willpower is a strictly limited physiological resource remains genuinely contested. What the research does agree on is this: relying on willpower alone without environmental design or habit substitution is a fragile strategy. You can override a craving for days, even weeks. But if the cue still fires and the reward is still missing, the old routine is waiting in the wings. Patient, practiced, automatic.
The key insight, and this one shifts everything, is that routines are interchangeable. The cue can stay, the reward can stay, the routine between them is the variable. This is sometimes called the golden rule of habit change in behavioral science literature. Keep the cue and the reward, swap the routine. It sounds almost too simple. In practice, it requires honest investigation. What reward is this routine actually delivering? And the honest answer is sometimes uncomfortable. Charles Duhigg, in his reporting on habit science, describes an office building where employees gathered in hallways near the vending machines each afternoon. Management assumed the draw was sugar. They moved the vending machines. The gathering continued. They removed the machines entirely. The employees still clustered at 3 p.m. The routine wasn't about food. It was about social connection. The cue was time, mid-afternoon restlessness. The reward was brief human contact. The vending machines had been props, not causes. When management introduced a brief, optional group interaction at 3 p.m., the hallway clustering dropped. Same cue, same reward, new routine. The habit didn't die, it evolved.
Think about one routine you've tried to change and failed to more than once. What reward were you actually chasing? Not the reward you think you should want, the one your nervous system was actually seeking. Tension relief? Stimulation? A sense of control? Brief distraction from something harder? The answer to that question is the key. Not the willpower. The answer. Identify one habit routine you want to change. Write down 3 alternative routines that could plausibly deliver the same reward. You don't need the perfect replacement. You need options to test. Try one for 3 days. Observe whether the reward is met. If not, try another. You are not fighting your brain. You are negotiating with it.
Rewards are the engine of habit formation. and the most misunderstood element of the loop. When people think about rewards, they think of conscious pleasure, a cookie, a compliment, a feeling of accomplishment. But the brain's reward system is running a more primitive calculation. It is asking one question constantly. Did this action reduce a craving? Not, did this make me happy? Not, was this good for me? Just, did the craving ease? The neurological marker of a completed habit reward involves dopamine. Specifically, the brain's dopamine system doesn't simply fire after a reward arrives, it fires in anticipation of it. This was established through landmark neuroscience research by Wolfram Schultz in the 1990s. Schultz demonstrated that as animals learned to associate a cue with a reward, dopamine neurons gradually shifted their activity. Instead of firing at reward delivery, they began firing at the moment the predictive cue appeared. By the time you've performed the routine, the reward is almost confirmatory. The wanting came first. This is why habits can feel urgent in a way that is disproportionate to their actual payoff. The brain isn't only responding to the reward you received, it is chasing the hit it has learned to expect. This also explains craving. A craving is a brain that has registered the cue and is now demanding the completion of the loop. Attempting to resist craving through sheer resolve burns extraordinary cognitive resources, and as the contested but instructive willpower research suggests, that strategy is unreliable over time. A better strategy is to satisfy the craving through a different routine or to redesign the environment so the cue fires less frequently. Reward is also where habit stacking lives. A writer named Elise had one non-negotiable morning habit: coffee. She made it every morning without a thought. The smell, the ritual, the warmth, all of it was deeply rewarding to her nervous system. She had tried, repeatedly, to add a journaling habit. It never stuck. One morning, she placed her journal beside the coffee maker the night before. The next morning, the cue, the smell of brewing coffee, triggered her to pick up the journal while she waited. She wrote 3 sentences. That was all. By the end of the month, she was writing a full page each morning without effort. She hadn't built a new habit. She had attached one to an existing reward. The coffee's reward extended slightly to the journaling. The loop absorbed the new behavior. Habit stacking, linking a desired behavior to a behavior already automated. What rewards are your habits actually delivering, and which of those rewards could you redirect? And where in your existing routine is there a reward strong enough to carry something new? Everything we've covered so far has a shadow application. The same loop that builds a morning run builds an avoidance pattern. The same reward mechanism that powers habit stacking powers compulsion. Understanding the loop is neutral. What you do with that understanding is not. Destructive habits are not character flaws. They are loops that once solved a real problem and now persist past the point of usefulness or at a cost higher than the benefit. Recognizing that doesn't excuse the behavior, it explains the architecture, and architecture can be redesigned. The first move in breaking a destructive loop is almost always the same: interrupt the automaticity before the routine fires. This means identifying the cue, going back to your cue map, and introducing a deliberate pause or pattern break at the moment of the cue. That pause is not passive. That pause is the intervention. You are not white-knuckling through the routine. You are inserting consciousness back into a process that had gone unconscious, just long enough to make a choice, not forever, just at the moment it matters most. Over time, with enough repetition, the pause itself becomes automatic. The new routine follows. The old loop weakens through disuse, not through force, but through redesign. This is what behavioral researchers call an implementation intention. specifying in advance exactly what you will do when a specific cue appears. The concept was developed and studied extensively by Peter Gollwitzer at New York University. A 2006 meta-analysis he co-authored, drawing on 94 independent studies with over 8,000 participants, found that forming implementation intentions had a medium to large effect on goal attainment, a genuinely meaningful result in behavioral science terms. The if-then format isn't pedantic, it is neurologically functional. A pre-made decision is faster and cheaper than a fresh one made under craving. An example: when I feel the urge to check my phone during dinner, I will place my phone face down and take one slow breath. The specificity is the point. You are preloading the pause. Understanding the loop is one kind of knowing. Living differently inside it is another. The gap between those two things is where most habit change efforts collapse. Not from lack of information, from lack of implementation structure. So, let's close that gap. Research on habit formation, including Philippa Lally's 2010 study published in the European Journal of Social Psychology, found that new habits typically took an average of 66 days to become automatic, with a wide individual range from 18 to 254 days, depending on the complexity of the behavior and the person performing it. The often cited 21-day figure has no strong empirical basis. It appears to have originated from anecdotal observations in plastic surgery patients. The practical takeaway: habits that stick are habits that are specific, contextually anchored, and immediately rewarding in some form. Vague intentions, I want to exercise more, I want to eat better, are consistently outperformed by concrete, cued, rewarded behaviors. This isn't about motivation. Motivation is a feeling. Feelings are inconsistent. What you're building is a system, and systems don't require motivation to operate. They require design. Step 1. Choose one behavior you want to automate. Keep it small enough to be laughable. Not exercise daily, but put on workout shoes after my morning coffee. Not read more, but read 2 pages before turning off my bedroom light. Specificity is not a limitation, it is the mechanism. Step 2. Identify your anchor, the existing habit or event your new behavior will follow. This is your cue. It must be consistent. It must already happen most days. Write it down in this format. After I do this existing behavior, I will do this new behavior. Step 3. Design your immediate reward. Before the habit has a chance to deliver long-term payoff, it needs a short-term signal that tells your brain the loop was worth completing. This can be as simple as a check mark on paper, a brief verbal acknowledgement to yourself, done, or pairing the new behavior with something inherently enjoyable. Because dopamine fires in anticipation of reward, the sooner the signal arrives after the behavior, the more effectively it reinforces the loop. The reward must come within seconds of the routine, not hours later. That's the blueprint. 3 steps, 1 habit, 66 days, or however long it takes your particular brain to absorb it. Don't add a second habit until the first is running on autopilot. The goal is not to change everything. The goal is to build proof, evidence your own nervous system can verify that you are someone who does what you intend to do. Which brings us to identity. The researchers who study long-term habit change have noticed something that the discipline-focused crowd tends to miss. The habits that stick the longest are not just behaviors, they are expressions of identity. James Clear, synthesizing the behavioral research in his widely read work on habit formation, makes this point precisely.
There is a difference between someone trying not to smoke and someone who simply identifies as a non-smoker. The behavior follows the identity. This isn't affirmation as wishful thinking, it is a genuine cognitive mechanism. When your behavior aligns with your self-concept, it requires less conscious effort to maintain. When it conflicts, it requires constant override. You are allowed to decide in advance who you are becoming and then act accordingly, one small, cued, rewarded behavior at a time. I build my life one loop at a time. Say it plainly. Don't perform it. Let it be a quiet statement of architectural fact.
There is a moment, and you may have already had one like it, when you catch yourself doing something good automatically. You reached for water instead of something you'd have regretted. You took a breath before you responded. You opened the book. You laced the shoes. And you didn't have to decide to do it. It just happened. Because somewhere behind the scenes, you had quietly, patiently built the groove. That moment is not a small thing. In that moment, the architecture you designed is running. The loop is doing what loops do, completing itself reliably, without fanfare. You have become, in that small slice of behavior, someone different from who you were when you started. Not through dramatic transformation, through repetition, through specificity, through the patient accumulation of chosen actions. Habits are not the whole of character, but they are the visible evidence of it. They are the daily vote you cast for the person you are becoming. Each loop, completed deliberately, is a vote. Each cue, met with a new routine, is a rewrite. Each reward, designed intentionally, is a signal to your own nervous system. This is who we are now. This is what we do.
The behavioral science is consistent on one core principle. Identity follows action, not the other way around. You do not wait to feel like a consistent person before acting consistently. You act consistently, and the feeling follows. You do not wait to feel like a healthy person. You perform one health-adjacent behavior, anchor it to a cue, reward it, and repeat. Over weeks, your nervous system begins to reorganize around that new reality. You become what you repeatedly do. And here's the mercy in that. You do not have to overhaul everything at once. You never did. The old story that change requires dramatic effort, enormous willpower, a complete reinvention of self, that story is not just unhelpful, it is contradicted by the evidence. The brain does not respond well to overwhelm. It responds well to pattern, to repetition, to reward. Start small enough that failure is almost impossible. Build a loop so modest it barely seems worth doing. Do it anyway. Let it compound. The interest on small, consistent action is staggering over time, not because of motivation and not because of discipline, but because of design.
You are the architect of your own behavioral environment. The cues around you, the routines you default to, the rewards your nervous system has learned to chase, none of these are fixed. None of them are you. They are the furniture of a life that was arranged partly by you, partly by circumstance, partly by sheer unconscious repetition, and furniture can be moved. The loop that runs you can be replaced by the loop you choose. Walk through your day tomorrow with one question running quietly underneath everything. Is this a groove I dug or a groove I chose? Because the moment you can tell the difference, the moment that question has an answer, you are already standing at the beginning of something better. The smell of fresh coffee in a clean kitchen, shoes by the door, a journal already open, this is what a designed life feels like from the inside. And it is waiting for you, one small loop at a time.